Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. Russia and Ukrainian forces have exchanged missile and artillery fire that's killed at least 6 people. The fighting today indicates neither side's ready to concede any ground despite recent military setbacks from Moscow and the toll on the invaded country after almost 7 months of war. The exchange of fire came hours after the two sides made a major prisoner swap and a day after Russia's President Vladimir Putin called up reserve troops to supplement his military forces. The first round of drafted soldiers began today. Meanwhile, the war in Ukraine has taken center stage at the United Nations, where President Joe Biden and Ukraine's leader Volodymyr Zelensky spoke yesterday. Christopher Martinez has more.
Before President Joe Biden rose to speak at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, there was no doubt that he would be speaking about the war in Ukraine. And so he did.
This war is about extinguishing Ukraine's right to exist as a state, plain and simple, and Ukraine's right to exist as a people. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whatever you believe, that should make your blood run cold.
Biden did talk about other issues at the General Assembly's annual meeting, issues like climate change. He announced a nearly $3 billion investment on global food insecurity. He proposed expanding the United Nations Security Council to give more voice to Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. But it's clear what was the subject of the day. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also addressed the General Assembly. He spoke via a pre-recorded video.
A crime has been committed against Ukraine, and we demand just punishment.
He talked about peace, but also about the need for Ukraine to defend itself.
We need defense support, weapons, military equipment, and shells.
Reporting for Pacifica Radio News KPFA, I'm Christopher Martinez.
At least 17 people are dead in Iran from clashes between Iranian security forces and protesters angry over the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who died in police custody for not wearing her headscarf properly. That's according to an anchor on state TV. Protesters have burned police stations, and images and video on social media show women burning their headscarves with signs that read, "Did you know letting your hair blow in the wind is a crime?" Meanwhile, the hacktivist group Anonymous says it's hacked into Iran's security system and is controlling more than 1,000 cameras on Iranian streets. The group said Iran's government will pay for what they did. New York's Attorney General is suing former President Donald Trump, his children, his company, and its executives, charging business fraud by outrageously inflating the value of his properties and businesses to obtain loans with lower interest rates and lower his taxes. Attorney General Letitia James made the announcement Wednesday.
Mr. Trump and the Trump Organization repeatedly and persistently manipulated the value of assets to induce banks to lend money to the Trump Organization on more favorable terms than would otherwise have been available to the company, to pay lower taxes, to satisfy continuing loan agreements, and to induce insurance companies to provide insurance coverage for higher limits and at lower premiums. We show that they violated several state criminal laws, including falsifying business records, issuing false financial statements, insurance fraud.
James says he's also charged with conspiring to commit the acts and is referring the case to federal authorities for similar federal crimes, as well as the IRS. In one instance, she says Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate should have been valued at about $75 million, but he fraudulently inflated its value to $739 million. The Federal Reserve is raising its key interest rate 0.75 of a point for the third straight month to fight inflation. Federal Chair Jerome Powell made the announcement Wednesday.
With today's action, we have raised interest rates by 3 percentage points this year. At some point, as the stance of monetary policy tightens further, it will become appropriate to slow the pace of increases while we assess how our cumulative policy adjustments are affecting the economy and inflation. Restoring price stability will likely require maintaining a restrictive policy stance for some time. The historical record cautions strongly against prematurely loosening policy.
The move will affect consumer and business loans, and it's the highest level since the Great Recession in early 2008. Critics of higher interest rates warn they may cause a recession. Other nations have also raised their interest rates. The Swiss National Bank raised its key interest rate 0.75%, its biggest hike ever to fend off inflation. And the UK Central Bank is raising its key interest rate by 0.5 percentage point in its 7th straight hike, aimed at taming soaring inflation. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.